Hey everyone, so 3.14 is finally in Wave 2 of PTU, so that means that everyone has access to it. And so there have been some other changes since my last video, mostly balance changes, but there's also been some Xeno threat playtesting going on. But I'd say the biggest change that's going to take a while to get used to is some of the new key bindings and just the whole new way combat works. So I wanted to make a video just specifically going through those changes to help you all out with some of those new keybinds and the new systems, and everything's timestamped, so if you're just looking for information about one thing in particular, you can go ahead and skip to that part of the video. Alright, so like I mentioned, there's been a lot of balance changes in this patch, with various weapon types being switched to different sort of roles, like CIG is trying to have it so that ballistic cannons are now more effective against ships that are larger than the ship that you're flying, so like a fighter would use those to take on ships that are larger than itself. But overall, I'd say the effect of a lot of these changes are greatly reduced time to kills. And a lot of this is due to weapons just having higher fire rates overall than before. So you can see I'm in the Super Hornet here, and I've got some CF series laser repeaters equipped. And if you remember the old speed that they fired at, well, now this is not overclocked or anything, they just fire this fast. You can also see them running out of ammo, which is another change to do with the capacitor system that I'll go into in a bit later. But yeah, time to kill is really low in this patch, and another reason for that is shields at sizes 1 and 2 are greatly diminished. So basically, if you're in a fighter and you take any more than a couple of hits, your shields are going to go down. And this isn't all that big of a deal for light fighters and stuff because you weren't going to be tanking a ton of damage before anyway, but the amount that you can take now before your shields go down is noticeably less. Where it's a big problem right now, I think, is on medium ships, so ships with those size 2 shields, especially things like the Freelancer and Cutlass, because it's much harder to dodge enemy fire in those ships, but the shields are really barely even better than size 1 shields right now at the moment, so they're definitely going to have to work on balancing that, and I'm sure they'll get it fixed. But if you are flying a ship with size 2 shields, then maybe for the PTU consider flying something else, or just be warned that it's going to be very difficult for you to keep those shields up. Other than that, there's a couple other things to note. So as part of this balancing change, a lot of weapon ranges have been changed as well. So if you're noticing that you have to get really close to your targets before your little pip will show that you're in range, then that's not really a glitch, that's just a design choice at the moment. I believe that range is around 1600 meters for weapons from sizes 1 to 4, so for those size 4 weapons that is quite a significant decrease in range, and I'm not sure if it's going to stay like this, but just be aware that it might be like that. And then the other thing to note is that the AI seem to be quite significantly better in this patch. And I think this is actually a good thing because now you do have to try for those bounty hunting missions. But another thing to note is they're also a lot more prone to using their missiles. And this kind of seems to be a thing that varies from patch to patch. But yeah, I was pretty much always getting locked with a missile whenever I was engaging bounty targets. So make sure you're stocked up on those countermeasures. Alright, now let's get into the capacitor system. And so the biggest change I think that you're going to notice right away is for energy weapons, you now have a limited capacity. So you can see over here on the right, as part of these new canvas sliced HUDs, you can see the ammunition for all of your weapons, which I think is really nice. And you can see I've got ammunition counts for my Scorpions, which are ballistics. So you'd expect to see those have a limited amount of ammo, but you can also see that I have a limited amount for my laser repeaters as well. And you can see that depletes pretty quickly when you shoot those. And then after a short delay it starts regenning. This regen rate is controlled by how much power you have diverted to your weapon capacitor. So your capacitor controls are going to be on F5 through F8, and the default keybind for increasing power to your weapons is hitting F5. And you can see when I hit that, it doesn't move it all the way towards weapons, but if you hit it 4 times, it'll divert all your power to weapons. Now this doesn't mean your thrusters and shields are going to be off, but they're just going to be not regening, I don't think at all, if you have it in this configuration. But you can see what that does is you actually get more capacity for stored rounds, and they recharge much faster versus the normal. And yeah, if you want to reset your power balance, that's going to be on F8. Alright, so moving on to the maneuvering thruster capacitor. So this is going to basically change how fast your boost meter recharges, which you can see over on the left when you're holding your boost. And a nice change is you no longer really overheat when you're using your boost, you just run out of boost meter. So this is the default recharge rate in this Hornet here. It's actually kind of slow, but again, if you press F6 and divert more power to that, it's going to recharge a lot faster. And then the same sort of thing goes for shields. So the button you hit to increase power to shields is going to be F7. And I'll show some clips of me in combat in a bit. But if you're disengaging and you know you're going to be able to dodge shots for a little bit and you just want to get your shields back online, it can be nice to boost that up and they'll recharge pretty quickly versus the pretty slow default recharge rate. And that's another thing to note. I think all of the shields right now have pretty much the same values where they're trying to test out this new system. So if you notice that swapping out your components in this patch doesn't seem to be making much of a difference, that isn't a glitch either. Alright, and then before we move on to some of the other stuff, speaking of those weapon capacities, I just wanted to point out that the ammo count for ballistics is very low right now, and this is another part of the balance changes, is that they're trying to make it so that all ballistics have a very low ammo count. I personally am not the biggest fan of this, but it's just something to be aware of. Now, a lot of ships have had their default loadouts changed for this PTU cycle because I think they want energy weapons to be mostly tested, so it seems like a lot of ships that used to have mostly ballistic setups now are running a lot of energy weapons. But if you do swap out some of your weapons on your ships for ballistics, just be aware that you're probably only going to be able to get through 1 or 2 missions with that ammo capacity at the moment. Now, as for general flight performance of ships, for the light fighter and medium fighter sort of category, I'd say it hasn't really changed all that much. They're all pretty fast and nimble as they were before, and with the boost being changed to a meter instead of that overheat mechanic, you can really boost for quite a while, so you've got quite a lot of maneuvering potential in these fighters now. Now moving up a size to your medium to large-ish ships, these are a bit more sluggish, I'd say, in general in 3.14. You notice it the most on ships like the Vanguard, which used to be actually quite nimble for their size. Another ship that's notably gotten worse in this patch is the Star Runner. But yeah, I'd say medium ships in general are in a bit of a rough state right now with the changes to their shields and then these flight performance changes. And then large ships, I'd say, are mostly unchanged. I flew the Carrack around a little bit, and it did take a while to get out of Crusader's atmosphere, but nothing out of the ordinary really. Alright, now moving on to the missile operator mode, this is another place that combat has been changed, and I think all the changes here are generally positive. So the biggest drawback to this mode is that you can now no longer shoot while you're in the mode, which you can access by clicking down the scroll wheel. And so you can see when I'm in this mode, I can no longer shoot my main weapons. But like I said, with those decreased weapon ranges and the minimum lock ranges of missiles, there's not much of an overlap to where you'd want to use both at the same time, because most missiles can only lock on at distances of greater than a kilometer, and ship weapons from size 1 to 4 now only have a range of a bit under 2 kilometers. So in my opinion, it's not that big of a deal that you can't do both at once. Now when you're in this mode, you can see that over on the right where I had all my weapons, you can see the type of missile that I currently have selected. And what's nice is if you're in a ship with multiple types of missiles, you can right click to cycle through these, and that wasn't something that you could do before. You had to just kind of sequentially use up your missiles in whatever order your ship decided was best. But now you can actually choose which type of missile you're locking. I'll show some clips of me in combat, but to lock a target, you basically just have to have them targeted in the same way that you usually would, and it'll automatically start locking a missile. And when the circle around the ship turns green, that's when you know you have the best lock possible. But what's nice is you can actually launch the missile at any time without even having a lock, so you could potentially dumbfire missiles if the target is big enough and still be effective with that. So I feel like with the upcoming Xeno threat missions, this could be useful for going against those Idrises, since you might not even need a lock to land some hits with your missiles against those. And yeah, while this missile operator mode means you can't shoot and fire missiles at the same time anymore, I think the control that it gives you over your missiles and which ones you use and what time you use them at is worth it in my opinion. But let me know what you guys think on this. At the moment though, I think a lot of the other balance changes are much more questionable than this, so maybe that's why I'm not being so critical on it right now. And then the last big change that isn't necessarily related to combat, but is often used in combat, is the new scanning system. So scanning mode has been moved off of tab, and you can actually access it by hitting V now, but hitting tab will just launch a ping, and this ping functions similarly to what it would before, except instead of the massive cubes that kind of blocked everything on your screen, you just kind of get a blob of dots that indicate where something might be. And then those dots get smaller as you get closer, and then you get a white sort of indicator to show that there's something there and your ship can't quite detect it, but then once you get close enough and pick up enough of its signature, it'll turn into whatever it is, so in this instance a rock. And then you hit V to enter scanning mode like you usually would, and you can scroll in and out to change your scan radius. And one thing to note with this is that if you have one of those white dots to show that something's there, but your ship can't quite recognize what it is. If you scan and zoom in on it, there's a chance that you'll be able to pick up enough information about it to actually figure out what it is. And so for scanning a rock here, you can see it's the standard sort of info that you'd always get, but I'll show some clips of me scanning ships here, and you can actually see their loadouts if you've got enough of their signature, which is a new feature, and it could also be very useful in a combat scenario because knowing what kind of weapons your opponent is running before they use them on you could be very useful and kind of inform your strategy for dealing with them. Oh, and then one thing I forgot to mention was you can adjust the angle of your ping like you can before. So if you don't change anything, it's the default setting like it used to be of a 360 degree ping where it picks up stuff all around you. But if you use the comma or period buttons, you can either increase that field with the comma or you can decrease it with the period. And you can see you get a little visual indication. And over to the left of my speed indicator, you can see what angle of field of view it'll be scanning with. So you can get all the way down to a 1 degree ping. And I think the visual indicator of the ping going out is a little bit confusing at the moment because it doesn't look like all that much more focused of a ping, but it does appear to be working. Because you can see when I ping at this much lower FOV, I'm not picking up anything that's around me to the side, which I will be picking up in the 360 degree ping. Again, removed from these balance changes, I think the overall combat experience in this patch would be really awesome. Just having that extra level of engagement when you're fighting to be able to control your ship systems in a easy to do way. But when you combine that with some of the other balance changes right now, it's a very different experience from 3.13 and takes some getting used to. It's still fun though, and I'm definitely looking forward to these upcoming Xenothreat events, so I'd say get into the PTU right now if you feel like it, and get used to these new combat systems. So I hope this helped you out, and if it did, then please consider leaving a like and or subscribing, and if you really want to support me, you can do that by becoming a channel member. And I'd like to thank my channel members GreatWatch93 and Starlit Domina. Thank you very much for supporting the channel, and thank you all for watching.